Hello everyone and welcome once again to another program of Prime Time. I'm your host Beverly and wishing you a happy new year, wishing you all the best for 2016. May all your dreams come true. It has been just a month since the Marlin cabinet assumed office, and in the new year, a new government at the helm. What can the people expect? Well, Prime Time is privileged today to have the Prime Minister, Minister Marlin, in the studio with us today, and he's going to tell us firsthand as to what's going to be happening in the next, I would say, 9 months upcoming. So stay tuned, you won't want to miss this interview, and we'll be back in a moment.
At Nagico, the things that matter to you matter to us. Like knowing you're fully covered after an accident, the security of your home and everything in it that means so much to you. And knowing that even when the weather does its worst, you and your family are covered. At Nagico, we're about much more than just insurance. We're about the big things and the small things that mean everything.
Vitamalt takes care of you. And now, check under the marked caps for a chance to win prizes. More detail on press.
At SXM, we're taking travel and tourism to new heights. Here we boast spacious check-in areas, 10 passport control points, comfortable departure lounges, and an exciting new airport mall. Finally, there's an airport in the Caribbean that takes your travel plans as seriously as you do. Princess Juliana International Airport.
Welcome back and thank you very much for joining us. This is Prime Time, and as I mentioned earlier, we are pleased to have the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. William Marlin, in our studios today. He's come to give some New Year's greetings via Prime Time, and we're really going to have to put you, as we would say, in the hot seat. We want to know what's happening for the next 9 months. So thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, Beverly. It's always it's always a pleasure to be on the program and through the program to be able to communicate with the people of St. Martin. I would like to make use of this opportunity to, again, briefly extend a Happy New Year to all the people of St. Martin, and in particular to your viewers and listeners to Prime Time.
Mm-hmm. And so, it's been a month since your cabinet took office, and so how has it been?
Well, it's a little over a month. We got into office on the 19th of November, so just before Christmas we celebrated, so to speak, a month. It's been challenging. It's been interesting. The first weeks, of course, were, from my end, consumed with the entire idea of the snap elections that was scheduled for February and changing the national decree to postpone the elections, and now we have a date in August 2016. We have, a clairvoyant in the person of the leader of one of the political parties out there with a listing of what he knows the government is going to do and predicting that we're going to shift the date of the election. If he's trying to fish for anything, no, there won't be no change of the date. We are not changing the date. This is what it is and this is what it will be. So, my message basically to the leader of the UP party is, rather than presenting a preview of what the Marlin cabinet is going to do in 2016, I think he should present to the people a report card of what his government had done in the year that they were in office. I believe that is what his focus should be, as to promises were made during a campaign. They got into office, and we wouldn't discuss how they got there, but they were there for a full year, and the question would be, what have you done during that year? I am not going to engage in any answering about this is not true, that will not happen, this will not happen, that will not happen. I have my focus as to where I would want to go in the 9 months ahead of us, and basically win the endorsement of the majority of the voters on St. Martin to give this government another 4 years.
Yeah. So how challenging is it for you to be able to get stuff done in just 9 months?
Well, we got to realize the circumstances under which the government came to office. There was a vote of no confidence against the former cabinet that would have given a new government some 3 years in office. However, after getting the vote of no confidence, the government invoked Article 59 to dissolve Parliament, and they set as the date for the elections February 9th. That changed everything. So rather than having a government for 3 years, you ended up with a government of basically a month or two. That did not make much sense, so to speak. But for me, more important was the decision to dissolve Parliament was based on the fact that the government took a stand against ship jumpers. We can't continue down this road. And if we look at the history of ship jumpers in 2010, after our first elections, the first ship jumper then was Patrick Illage, who had defected from the National Alliance. After that, you had Romain Laville, who defected from the UP party. This time around, after the 2014 election, shortly after the election, you had the first one to move from his party was Cornelius de Weaver. Shortly after that, you had Leona Marlin. And within a short period again of less than a year, you had MPs Maurice Lake and Silvio Mazza. So the ship jumpers went in one period from 2 to now 4. All of them were their first time that they were elected to office.
Yes.
So if the trend continues, we would have either gotten 6, 2 plus 4, or you would have had a doubling. So 2 the first time, 4 the second time, and then you would have 8. So holding an election without changing anything to our regulations, without changing anything to our electoral laws, our electoral system, would not change anything. So technically, we could have had elections on the 9th of February. A party could have won, let's say, 8 or 9 seats,
Yes.
and still find themselves in opposition the next day. Or you could have a government that is formed on the basis of a majority in Parliament, and before the government can start to govern, the government would lose its majority, creating another setback. We would have to go through the formation of a government, and when that government takes office, any little shift again, we could have a new government again.
How could we stop the ship jumping?
Well, the proposal that I have on the table now that, Julio Romney, for instance, is waging a campaign against, I'm saying we have a problem in St. Martin. I'm not here to solve problems in Timbuktu, Japan, or Nigeria. The problems that we face are the problems that we need to address. If people are jumping ship in order, let's say, to gain leverage to form a government, and I'm honest, the government that we have now is because members have moved from their party, declared themselves independent to form a government. But that is also something that has happened in the past as well, where we had an election and the same night or the day after, people have moved from one party to the other. So what we are saying with the proposal, very basic, very simple. A government has to be formed on based on a majority. The government has to be formed by a party or parties that have a majority amount of seats in Parliament. So if you have a coalition of, let's say, 8 or 9, one person, if you have a coalition of 8, if one person leaves that coalition and walks over to the other side, they can form a government. So then you have a new government with a new majority of 8. 6 weeks after, one person doesn't get what he wants or is not satisfied. He leaves and he declares himself independent. So you have another government. And that can continue back and forth. And even if a ship jumper now, for instance, does not achieve, let's say if you leave, a member leaves his party, he forms a government over here.
Yeah.
That same member can leave that coalition and go back and form the government here again. So what the proposal simply is saying, to support a government, the support has to come from parties, not from individuals.
And that may
And parties are established, seats are given to parties at the end of the electoral process. So if you have 8 parties contesting the election, maybe 3, 4, or 5 of them win seats. No matter how many people leave the party and declare themselves independent, it is not a party. If I leave the National Alliance to form a government elsewhere, I am no longer, I'm not a party. I am a member of parliament with a seat. That is the proposal that's on the table.
Oh gosh, we need to take a break and we come back about the instability that this is causing. As we have been saying, there are 5 governments in 5 years. What image are we giving out there to the world? And because of our product, which is tourism. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back.
Okay.
Stay tuned and we'll be back in a moment.
A cruise is a great adventure, not only for passengers, also for us. The Port of St. Martin. Our port always reflected the needs and aspirations of the time. From the first to the 1.75 millionth passenger in 2013. Our cruise story started in 1963 with our first cruise passenger. 50 great years later, 20 million passengers later, thousands of cruise berths later, we've become the leading port in the Caribbean. 50 fantastic years. Like a dream. The dream of Port St. Martin lives on and reinvents itself every day. The best is yet to come.
Travel Planners, an award-winning agency on St. Martin with a well-trained, knowledgeable and friendly staff dedicated to making your travel arrangements hassle-free. We can book your airline, car, cruise and hotel reservations to anywhere in the world. Visit our offices or log on to our website and take advantage of our special packages to the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. Travel Planners, voted best travel agency on St. Martin.
Hey, Bob, you're on family vacation. Oh, but your daughter's got the measles. But don't worry about it. With your Be Sure travel insurance, children under 12 are covered for free.
Are you be sure? Be sure.
Yeah, for free.
Welcome back and thank you very much for joining us. This is Prime Time and we have the honor of having the Prime Minister in our studios today. He gave his New Year's greetings to our viewers of Prime Time. And so now we are talking about the effect of 5 governments in 5 years, the instability that it presents to the world out there.
Well, it's not only instability to the world. The governing process itself is extremely difficult because if you want to do something, let's take, for instance, when I was in government in 2013, we spoke about the possibility of looking at the construction of a tunnel. Now, you can't do something like that in a year. The planning and preparation itself takes, maybe a year or more. So if you're working on something like that and the government changes and the new government comes in, the government picks up somewhere else. And so you have with basically any and all areas of governing. So the constant changing of government is not in the best interest of the governing process. It may be good that one government has left. But if you keep changing governments after year and a half, it does not bode well as far as stability is concerned. And with the proposal that I've put out there, if accepted, what you're going to get is that no longer can one individual decide the fate of the country. So if you have, for instance, a coalition, let's say like we have now of 8 members, that a member says, well, I'm quitting my party and I'm going to talk to the other side of the fence. You can quit your party, you can become an independent, but your seat cannot be used in the formation of the next government. You can support the government, you can vote along with them, you can support their proposals, you can support their budget, but in the formation process of that government, in order for you to be able to present a government for screening and for swearing in to the governor, it would have to be based on majority representation coming from parties and not from individuals.
How challenging is it for you to carry out the daily running of the country when you have your portfolios from your party, then you have the independents having other portfolios? How do you make this into one?
Well, just before I got here, I was involved in a discussion with some of the coalition members. It is easier sometimes than one would think. First of all, you have your coalition agreement, and you agree to make, in our case, we had a governing program from the Red, White, and Blue Coalition, which we have endorsed. But because the governing period is now cut down to 9 months, we have to adjust, and we can no longer talk about the governing program, but we will talk about the action program of the government. And the exercise we are going through now is basically for all the ministries to set their priorities in terms of what are the actions that my ministry would want to carry out in the 9 months. And that will then translate into our action program, which we will present to Parliament, which we will discuss, which we will present to the public of St. Martin. Now, do I have that action program ready? No, not yet. It is a work in progress. But for instance, from the Ministry of Romy, we have received, some 21 action points that they want taken up in the action program of the government. You have my Ministry of General Affairs. I have presented, for instance, the electoral reform is one of our priorities, because that is why we have asked to postpone the elections in order for us to push it through. The completion of the government building and moving the government into the building is something that, I've basically made a public announcement on it already, that our target is to move in by July. Today, I visited the building along with several other ministers and members of Parliament. We've had a walk around in the building. We've had certain discussions. And I've also presented the Youth Employment Fund, creating jobs, putting young people to work while they are being trained while working is also, for me, one of the priorities. But every minister and every ministry has its priorities. While, for instance, they have tried to play politics, again, to say, well, we dropped the construction of a medical center,
right.
or dealing with it. No, it is a priority as well, but you have to deal with it responsibly. The impression will be created that, there was a blueprint with plans, with everything, with financing, everything in place. But that is not so.
Not so?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, we'll take a break and then we come back. We want to talk about what's happening, in the next 9 months. So it means that you're going to be governing and also campaigning at the same time, because in 9 months you have an election. How are you going to balance both of that? Yeah. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
GEBE has been faithfully serving the communities of St. Martin, powering your home and our economy. Come rain or shine, our qualified team of professionals are working hard 24 hours a day to provide you and your family with safe, reliable electricity and water. We use the latest technologies and test our products daily to maintain the highest international standards. Our friendly staff is always there to assist you, whether in person, over the phone, or online. We are committed to constantly improving our products and services, making them more efficient, effective, and environmentally friendly to serve you better today and our next generation of clients tomorrow. GEBE, powering a brighter future.
Our friend Megawati is here with tips to save you energy. 1. Turn your airco temperature up. 2. Use a ceiling fan instead. 3. Buy energy-saving products. Save some green with NVGEBE.
The Daily Herald is my first source for up-to-date information and news. Putting together this program of prime time requires research and knowledge of current events. For local news, regional and international news, do read the Daily Herald. Before we go into how you're going to be balancing this, you have your action plans to work on, and also you have an election that's upcoming, so you need to look for candidates, and how you're going to balance all that?
Well, it's the regular thing, and for me personally, I've kind of grown to these short-term governments. The first time we got in government, it lasted 6 weeks in 1991. Then we got back in government in 1994 to 95. After 95, we had elections. We were left out in the formation. Then the hurricane of 95 came. We formed a new government with DP that lasted like 2 years. Then we had another government with Rollocks and Elton Jones that lasted until 99. And then again in 2009, was in government until 2010. And then again, we had the 2012, 13. So for me personally, I'm used to, working under pressure and working out in one year.
Government and opposition.
But it is something. You have advantages when you're in government, but you have disadvantages because while others have all the time in the world, you have the responsibility to govern as well. So yes, the work is cut out, but we will fare well.
Tell us your action plan, a little bit more about the action plan. As you said, we only have 5 more months, and you were explaining off camera about the new administration building.
No, one of the things that I said, important for us to complete this building and actually move in. And what I was saying, Beverly, it's like, picture yourself, you buy a brand new car for $65,000, you park it outside, or you put it in your garage at home, and you're renting a car every day. It makes no sense. So here it is, government, let's say, own a building, but we have not been able to move into this building. Prior to that, we did not own it. The Trinidad company, RGM, had owned it, and we were bound to a lease agreement. So here you're paying lease, but not living in the house you're paying lease for, not using the building. So that is a priority for us. It is not so that once the building is finished, all government employees and all government departments will move in. We will still have a number of departments that will be housed elsewhere simply because the building is not big enough.
How can we get people to vote in the next 9 months? People are very disillusioned. They are tired of voting. They're not going to come out and vote in the next 9 months.
That is not true. What you had was after the former cabinet invoked Article 59 to have snap elections in February, then you have really a majority of the people who are saying, don't come look for me, don't ask me to vote. We have voted already last year, and I'm not going back to the polls. That was the sentiment then. Things have shifted. You have a lot of people who are saying, but it doesn't make sense. Look, we have a government, the government is working. Why hold elections? But the reality is also setting in that there will be elections, and I am confident that the people will come out and will come out in large numbers in the upcoming election.
You're seeing an end of your political career. You've held all offices already, and we know you have an heir apparent.
No. What we've discussed internally in the party was that at the Congress of 2016, I would step down as the political leader of the party, but not that I'm giving up my political career or I'm sailing off
into the sunset.
Into the sunset. Ever since we started in 1978, in 2018, if God grants me that, even though we have an agreement that I'll live to be 112, it would be 40 years ago that we have started with Richard Gibson, with Vance James, with Leo Friday, Elaine Gums-Lawn, a number of us. 40 years ago, we embarked on this journey. Ever since then, Vance James was the late Vance James was the founding leader of the party, and then I took over in 1998, I think more or less it was. I think it's time, to give somebody else an opportunity, not just somebody else as well, but the party as such, because it's not a personal possession. I think one of the things that we are lacking overall in St. Martin are people with experience, senior people. We cannot look back and say we have had so many prime ministers. As a young country, we've only had 2 so far. But also in other areas of life, we don't have too many people who have been experienced directors of this or directors of that or head of this or head of that or even principals of school. It is now that we are getting a number of, let's say, former, but there were people who were there for many years. So politically, I'm not ready, with God's grace, to wrap it up, to fold it up. William Marlin ain't going anywhere. But as a party, we have decided, well, I have agreed to step aside as leader. And so far, it appears that the party Congress will endorse Sylvia Jacobs, our present Minister of Education, to become the new leader and to take on that challenge. But trust you me, she was one of my former students, and it's interesting, to see that transition from
Good luck and the best for you for 2016.
Thank you, Beverly.
This has been Prime Time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week, and may God bless you.